Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes Reacts. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively, we are two of the three Office Blokes.
Yes.
What can we say?
I don't know where he is. Still not heard anything from him. Getting a bit worried.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not worried because he's old enough to look after himself.
Yeah, no, it's grim,
Have you been in HR to ask them if he's booked any time off?
They said that he's not booked any time off whatsoever, and he was last heard screaming outside the office on Friday.
I left him on Friday, leaving the office.
Yeah.
And he was on a long call with somebody.
I've heard he owes a lot of money to loan sharks. Russian mafia, apparently.
A guy with a big he's got a bear and an AK-47 sat in his fridge at home.
Yeah, it's a shame. So, get well soon, Mike. Bring him back in one piece, please, or just send a piece.
Wonder if we get a ransom note.
Nah, probably given up by now. Anyway.
Probably ran out of chicken. Feed him something else. We'll eat anything else.
He won't even drink Stella. We just keep giving him Carlin. Anyway, two of the YouTube channels, Patreon page, social media, merch, all that good stuff. Click the link below and it will take you where you need to go. Yeah. Simple as just do it now. Seriously.
It's free.
Do it. Anyway, why Vietnam War tunnel rat job was so deadly. Now, is this going to be the American soldiers that are going down the tunnels that the Viet Cong have built?
Yeah.
Because that's how they transversed the whole...
Correct, yeah. Yeah, it was like... that's what it was, wasn't it? The war was
guerrilla
like
warfare.
Guerrilla warfare,
yeah.
Trench warfare.
Well, I mean, what can you do when everything's being napalmed above ground? It's much safer to be below there, and it's crazy. But this could be an interesting one, this. So we'll get into it. Why Vietnam War tunnel rat job was so deadly. Let's do this.
June 11th, 1969, Ba Ria City, Vung Tau Province, Vietnam. A newbie tunnel rat arrived at the base to a scene of utter destruction. Just days earlier, a platoon was hit by an M16 mine, aka the Jumping Jack. It got that name for the way it jumped in the air when stepped on. It killed 3 men and injured 24 others.
Jesus.
Not long after the hidden enemy laid an anti-personnel mine, a personnel carrier hit that mine. It was the first time that the unseasoned tunnel rat saw a dead body. It was chaos, each and every day. He had to learn fast. The #1 tunnel rat, nicknamed Yogi, was hit twice by mines. Bits were hanging off him as he told the newbie what he had to do next. This was not a job for the faint of heart, but someone had to do it. That story is true. It happened to a combat engineer in the Australian Army. He took on one of the hardest and scariest roles in the war, that of a tunnel rat. We'll get back to his story, but first, let's talk about the job. Prior to the Americans going to war with the Viet Cong, the French fought the Viet Minh from 1946 to 1954. During that time, the Viet Minh learned a thing or two about fighting a superpower. To beat someone far more powerful than yourself, you had to resort to guerrilla tactics. One of those tactics was keeping below ground, and so the Viet Minh got to work building a massive complex of tunnels. When the Americans arrived in 1955, the tunnels were already vast, but it was the Viet Cong that really made them a feat of engineering. During the Vietnam War, or the American War to the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong used those tunnels for all kinds of things. While the opening to the tunnels was small, they might lead to a complex system of tunnels that would lead to large underground spaces. It was within these spaces that the Viet Cong would hide, eat, sleep, and machinate attacks on their enemy. The tunnel served as headquarters, hospitals, barracks, and storage facilities. Since they had ventilation systems, it was possible to stay down there for a prolonged period of time. So we're not so much talking about men burrowing like rabbits, but men living in a subterranean world. These worlds provided safety from the hostiles. Like snakes, the men would come out of them at night, lay traps for the enemy, and sneak back into the tunnel. And that's how so many American and Australian soldiers lost their lives, to mine-laying soldiers that were rarely seen above ground.
Already, I'm absolutely blown away. I didn't know that the French were at war with, I know they said Viet Minh, was it? I didn't know the Australians played such a part in the American Vietnam War. This is crazy. Can you imagine just being handed a pistol and just being like, crawl down that hole, go and see if there's any bad guys?
Why not flood it?
I mean, where do you get the water from?
The ocean.
I suppose in Forrest Gump it rained quite a lot, didn't it? So you just put a funnel on top of all of them.
Just get someone, keep sending someone back and forwards like a bucket.
Yeah, everyone pissed out on it. They might not have known the extent of this though, because I genuinely thought.
Well, they're saying he was used as hospitals and all kinds of stuff, so I don't think they're small.
No, I was thinking tunnels like like when someone tunnels, like the Great Escape, that sort of thing, where it's, you can, a crawl space. Yeah. I didn't think it was.
But once you start flooding things like that, they start collapsing, don't they?
Yeah. But in hindsight, they could have done something about it.
It's actually an Australian combat engineering unit, the 3 Field Force, that were the first tunnel rats. The Americans later joined them, but we don't imagine guys were queuing up for the job. Just imagine it. They find the entrance but have no idea where the tunnel will lead or who they will encounter down there. That wasn't the only threat of humans to worry about, too. Vietnam is in the tropics, and the tropics are home to all kinds of dangerous creatures. Have you ever seen a Vietnamese giant centipede? Those fast-moving, prehistoric-looking creatures deliver one of the most painful insect bites known to man. And guess what? They too like to hide in tunnels. Then there were the snakes, the highly venomous and deadly banded krait, the Malayan pit viper, the king cobra, and a whole host of other badass snakes that can spoil a person's day. The soldiers had to deal with ants' nests, annoying bats, rats carrying the bubonic plague, as well as spiders that weren't generally a threat to life, but could make life painful. So you can imagine that going into one of those tunnels was about as frightening as getting into Ted Bundy's Volkswagen Beetle, but they had to do it, lest more men get blown to bits by these damned jumping jack mines. If the men can infiltrate the tunnels, they might not only kill a few of the enemy, but they would usually come across a stash of mines, grenades, and guns. There was another problem concerning arms. The tunnels were small, and so that meant that the tunnel rats couldn't take larger guns down them. They were usually only equipped with an M1911 pistol or an M1917 revolver. They'd also have a flashlight, a knife, and usually some explosives so they could blow up whatever they found down there. You can just picture it, a man crawling through the darkness, his flashlight in one hand and his pistol in the other. He crawls, and then he sees the enemy, he shoots, and then all he can hear is ringing in his ears. He's blinded by the flash and deafened by the noise. Then the earth above his head starts to fall. He needs to get out fast. What he doesn't know is that the Viet Cong have something special for him. Poisonous gas.
No.
And this tunnel rat didn't choose the gas mask option because the last time he wore one he could barely see. If the gas doesn't get him, the flood will. The Viet Cong designed this particular tunnel with a flooding feature if it should ever be infiltrated. Other times, the tunnel might just collapse, which wasn't a design feature but a case of poor construction. You'd have to be crazy to do this job. You also had to be short. Imagine a hulk of a man with quite the belly trying to navigate around a tunnel. Soldiers that were picked for the job were usually not taller than 165 centimeters. It was the same years later when the US Marine Corps and British Royal Marines fought in the Afghanistan War. Yeah, tunnel rats weren't only a thing in Vietnam. But let's stay with Vietnam for now and go back to the Australian soldier.
What nightmare, I'm 6'2". Oh, I'm too fat. I really wanted to go down. It sounds like absolute hell, doesn't it? Like a proper lose-lose situation. You'd probably be crawling through it hoping you don't come across anything.
You're going to though, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Also begs the question, why not just blow up all the entrances? They had tons of arsenal. Why not just put a bomb down the entrance of every single hole you come across and just block them in? I'm sure they thought of it. They would have tried loads of things, wouldn't they?
He was trained at the Australian Army's School of Military Engineering. He actually thought that this line of study would mean he'd be facing less combat and doing more engineering. He was wrong. He was being trained to become a tunnel rat. That meant learning about things such as mine detection, disarming booby traps, safely blowing stuff up, and learning how to get through tunnels. When he arrived in Vietnam, he walked into chaos. As we said, one of the first things he saw was the aftermath of a soldier stepping on a jumping jack mine. 3 bodies were outfitted with body bags, and after that, 24 men were wounded. He said those M16 mines were everywhere, and it was part of his job to find them. What the Viet Cong did was store them in the tunnels and then lay them at night. So each day was a new day, and there was always a possibility of new mines lying around. That's why the tunnel rat had such an important job. Find where the mines were stored and blow up the tunnel, and then no more mines. When he started the job, he worked as a tunnel rat number 2. He worked in a pair with tunnel rat number 1, and when 6 months was up, he became number 1, and he was joined by a newbie. He hadn't been a number 2 for long when he heard that a number 1 tunnel rat named Yogi had stood on a mine. Yogi was alive, but as you can imagine, he wasn't looking too well. In fact, only 3 Australians that stood on mines made it back home with their legs and lives intact. Yogi was one of them. He was lucky. The fatality rate in his unit was 33%. That's one reason why going into tunnels was not a prospect most soldiers liked. The Americans wanted to destroy the tunnels not from the inside but from the outside. If you dropped enough bombs on suspected tunnels, then they would cave in and anyone inside would suffocate. If you sprayed poisonous gases into them, the Viet Cong would die. You could also try and flood the area where the tunnels were, and by doing that, drown the enemy. The problem was that these efforts didn't always result in success. The reason for that was the fact that the Viet Cong made more impressive tunnels. They made them blast-proof, flood-proof, and provided extra ventilation so the gases weren't effective. They also made them in a zigzag shape to mitigate the effect of an explosion. This is why the tunnel rat was indispensable. Those guys were the only thing that really worked. Believe it or not, most American soldiers were not chosen to do this job, but actually volunteered. Most soldiers thought you'd have to be out of your mind to do the work. The centipedes and the snakes were one thing, but suffocation in a collapsed tunnel was something from a nightmare. So why did they volunteer? One soldier back then said it was sometimes a macho thing. Soldiers did it to show others just how tough they were. He said that many tunnel rats had had problematic lives back home in the US, so they wanted to show that they could be useful. And useful they were, as well as brave. One tunnel rat named C.W. Bowman said that his fellow soldiers thought he was a maniac doing the job. He said they took bets each time he went into a tunnel, and some men betted that he would die. Some men almost did, and this would become a weakness for the US military. We'll get around to that soon. Let's first take you through a mission. You shoot first and ask questions later. That was the mantra of the tunnel rat. Anything they came across, they shot at. They would usually fire only 3 bullets and then reload. The reason for this was the enemy wouldn't know how many bullets they had in the chamber. Let's say the mission was successful, and that the tunnel rat took out the enemy and discovered what was hidden down there. What would they find? On one mission, the tunnel was around 120 feet. At the end of the tunnel, the rat found places where men cooked and slept. As for items, he discovered 8 rifle grenades, 40 pounds of salt, and 6,000 pounds of rice, all of which was destroyed. On another mission, the tunnel rats found cameras, films, and printing presses, as well as weapons and ammunition. There was still a problem though, and that was the fact that even if the tunnel rats were successful, the Americans still had a problem winning the war. You can take out the tunnel, but there will always be more. This is a quote from Ho Chi Minh, the president of North Vietnam. You can kill 10 of our men for every 1 we kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and we will win. Take for instance the use of booby traps, horrific things that killed around 11% of American soldiers during the war. Sometimes the Viet Cong would put a punji stake trap in a larger part of the tunnel. These were holes filled with sharpened bamboo that would be covered with branches and leaves. When a soldier stood on the trap, the spikes would impale him, and worse, the spikes might have been daubed with poison or feces. The soldier would then scream out, but he wouldn't die. This was the point, because the Viet Cong wanted more men to go down into the tunnel. Not only were there often more traps down there, but even if there weren't, pulling an injured man off sharp sticks and dragging him out through the tunnel was very time-consuming. The Viet Cong would later say that the Americans spent so much time and energy rescuing their injured comrades that they had lots of time to regroup and plan what they were going to do next. The sheer horror of these traps were also very bad for morale. This is what Ho Chi Minh was referring to when he said the Americans would not be victorious. He was right too. There were other kinds.
This is absolutely like sweaty palms, horrific nightmare stuff, isn't it?
It's interesting though, because it's a lot of the stuff I didn't know about the war.
I don't know a lot about the Vietnam War.
I imagine a lot of this is what I think he alluded to it before, and he was saying it was very similar to the Afghan War.
Yeah,
because they do it in caves, don't they, as opposed to in the mountains.
Yeah,
as opposed to the underground. Still underground, I guess.
Yeah, but it's just that you can drop 1,000-pound bombs, but you're still not killing anyone, sort of thing. It's boots on. That's why I always say there's always going to be boots on the ground wars. You can't just win with bombs and drones and stuff. Unless you can have a little robot that goes down there instead. But
that's the other side of it, isn't it? Things are changing, mate.
Yeah. Scary stuff,
yeah,
though,
isn't it?
Traps. A tunnel rat might have hit a tripwire while crawling, and then the tunnel would have collapsed on him. There's a story of a tunnel rat that popped his head out of one entrance, and that triggered a spear that went through his neck. At other times, the Viet Cong made traps like something you might have seen in an Indiana Jones movie. A man could hit a tripwire in a tunnel, and then a concrete ball studded with spikes would come flying at him. A lieutenant named Jack Flower said he experienced a totally different kind of trap. His comrade went into a tunnel, and that man triggered a tripwire. After that, a box full of scorpions rained down on him. Snakes were also used. Sometimes the Viet Cong would place them in bamboo and tie them to the roof of the tunnel. When a soldier hit the bamboo, the snake would pop out and bite the man in his face. They scared the hell out of the soldiers, some of whom called them three-step snakes, because after you were bitten, you only had 3 steps before you died. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you can imagine being stuck in a dark tunnel with scorpions and snakes. Flowers went into over 100 tunnels. He later said this about the expeditions: "In these tunnels, your adrenaline was pumping like a river. I swear I could hear my heart beating. You'd feel your way along for booby traps. It got so you could sense them. Same for the VC. You could smell another human being in the tunnel. You knew he was waiting for you in the dark." All these horrors that the Viet Cong created instilled so much fear in the men that volunteering to be a tunnel rat wasn't exactly on every soldier's mind. But someone had to do it. They had to do it for the team, so to speak. This is what one American said about hiding in tunnels: "We often wondered how things happened in the night, and we never saw what was going on. Guys getting their throats cut. Nobody ever knew where these guys were coming from. They had to go down every tunnel they could find, otherwise strange things happened during the night. It created tremendous psychological stress not knowing where the enemy was, so sending down tunnel rats was some peace of mind." There were successful tunnel campaigns, such as Operation Crimp and Operation Cedar Falls, but in the end, the Viet Cong proved to be more resilient. While the American soldiers were literally having nervous breakdowns going into the tunnels, the Vietnamese soldiers were at home in them. If the tunnels were destroyed, they just built more of them. The Americans had the task of Sisyphus, pushing the giant rock up a slope for eternity. As for the fate of the tunnel rats, there isn't any data on how many of them died, but it's thought that most of them succumbed during those horrific explorations of the Vietnamese subterranean. Out of 100 or so tunnel rats in the American army, only 12 of them lived to tell the tale of those tunnels back on American soil. One of those men was Jack Flowers. He later said, "Why did we do it? I wasn't a tough guy. Nobody who knows me would ever suspect I could do what the tunnel rats did. I'd never want a son of mine to have to do it. Thank God," he said, "that these days men don't have to do what he did." Now you should watch this video, the insanely crazy story.
That is absolutely
really interesting.
It's so interesting, but it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah. It goes to show what goes on in the war. You know, it's. I mean, you look at some of the booby traps he set there. You know, I mean, it was almost like a TV show. You know, you go through, you prop that, and a snake falls down, and then you got all the bugs and shit flying, they're crawling around you.
Yeah. You'd have to. I mean, they said you need your flashlight and your gun, but really, it would have been better with like a flashlight on the head, a knife, and a gun, and then you can like knife the snakes.
But I don't think they wanted the flashlight on all the time, did they?
Probably not. No, because it's a big advert that you're coming.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just terrifying. I'm sure they tried loads of other things, but
obviously,
to me, it's like, you know, you could have 100 guys on the surface camping every tunnel entrance you can find at night, and then just kill whatever comes out.
Yeah,
but I'm sure they would have tried that.
Yeah, because you've got people patrolling as well. But what you've got, I think it's nowadays, I think you've got more advanced technology.
Yeah,
that you wouldn't have to do that now.
No, well, there's that. What do they use on? What's the one where they find historical building sites?
Oh, like a geological sensor sort of thing.
Like geophys, is it called? The one where they just basically run the thing over the ground and they can tell where foundations were and stuff. Sure, they can use things like that now.
Yeah. It's a little bit more different now, but very interesting. That brutal,
stressful. Like, can you imagine?
All right, my hands are stuck together like white knuckling it. Yeah, but yeah, a lot of fears in there, right? Bugs, snakes, tunnels, claustrophobia.
It's the claustrophobia. Like I've been getting into some of these like scary story videos on YouTube recently, and the claustrophobia ones where people are just stuck with their arms pinned by their side in something, and they just have to exist for 3 days until they give up. It scares me to death. It's absolutely horrific.
Maybe react to one of them.
So where's Mike?
Let us know in the comments if you want us to do one of them.
Yeah, well, apparently other people do react to that sort of stuff. But
don't know.
We'll see, won't we?
See. Hey, where's Mike? Hope you guys enjoyed it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.